light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me.
Take your Bibles as you have them this morning and go ahead and turn to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12, that will be our text that we've been looking at. Really, we've been looking at this passage all year long, seeking to see what we can do to grow a loving church, to find out what we can do to help ourselves be more apt to communicate that love that Jesus has communicated to us, and how we can share that love to others and help our congregation grow in that endeavor. And the numbers will come, but the numbers are not the most... Souls are the most important thing, absolutely, yes, but our numbers are not as important as that. We're concerned about making sure we're doing what's right first. And if we do what's right, then others will come in and we'll reach out to the lost and they'll want to become part of the body of Christ because of it. And that's our goal. So we'll be looking at Romans 12 in just a few seconds as we go on. As we do this, we're trying to integrate all of this stuff we've been talking about. And the slide of the title slide that we're looking at here is trying to deal with those problematic relationships, dealing with those people that sometimes it's just hard to deal with. Sometimes we just know that there's going to be problems. Sometimes we know it's going to be issues. But we have to learn to get along. We have to learn to face them. We have to learn to handle them. And we're going to look at this passage in Romans 12 in just a moment. But I want you to go on and put the next slide up, this next verse that we're going to look at. There was a woman who had a husband who had died, and her husband had died after a sickness, but he had made preparations for her. He had made sure that he had set some money aside for her, and it wasn't a lot, but it was enough for her to handle and take care of the arrangements and take care of some things. And when this woman was talking with one of her friends, she said, he did leave me some money. And she said, well, how much money did he leave you? She said, he left me $20,000. And she said, oh, you should be fine then. And she says, oh, no, it's all gone already. You've already spent that $20,000? Yeah. The funeral was just 2 weeks ago. How did you go through that? She says, have you been to a funeral lately? Do you know how much those things cost? The funeral alone, with the casket and everything, I had to pay $6,500. $6,500 for the funeral. And then I had to make a donation to the church. He had asked that we make a donation. So I took $500 and I made a donation to the church with the $500. So that's $7,000. And she said, well, that leaves you $13,000 left. Yes, I had $13,000, but then I had to go buy his memorial stone. Memorial stone. $13,000 for a memorial stone? How big was that memorial stone? 4 carats. It'll click sometime. Sometimes we hear the word inheritance. We hear the word inheritance and we like it because we know that it's something that we're going to get. It's something that we're going to have. Something that someone's passed on to us. Something that we're going to get to enjoy after. And as Christians, we have the greatest inheritance. We do have the greatest inheritance. We've got the home in heaven. But beyond that, we have an inheritance that we're able to enjoy while we're here in this life. We have something that we're able to enjoy while we live in this world. And that's part of the text in Romans 12 that we're going to deal with. But if you've read Romans 12 at all, and you know the text that we're going to be looking at, since we've already looked at it somewhat in the past few weeks, this passage here in 1 Peter sounds very similar to it. In 1 Peter 3, 8, 9, Peter says it this way: finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or revel for reveling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. Some versions are going to read, For this you were called for your inheritance. For this will be your inheritance. That as you do these things, you have the unity of mind, you share the sympathy, the brotherly love, the tender heart, the humble mind, that you don't return evil for evil, that you don't revel for revel, but you're humble and you bless others. That because we've been called to bless, we've looked at what the blessing is and the lost art of the blessing, going all the way back to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and what he did with Esau and Jacob and Esau, and the whole context there of what the blessing meant for them, and how we've missed out on what that blessing is for us. We're not blessing as we should. We've received that blessing from God, but as for us, we're not blessing others as we should be, as much as we should be doing. And here in this text, he tells us that we are to bless because we're called to do that, so that we may attain our inheritance, so that we may attain our blessing, so that we may get our inheritance. I want us to talk about that inheritance for just a minute. I want us to look at this blessing. I want us to look at what we can receive from God if we do these things. Now, when you go back to the text in Romans chapter 12, if you'll look there, it's a little different situation. The things are the same. In Romans chapter 12, beginning of verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Don't be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all men. If possible, so far it depends on you, you live at peace with all men. Beloved, never avenge yourself, leave room for the wrath of God, as it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Contrary, if your enemy's hungry, you feed him. If he's thirsty, you give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Church, there is a wealth of information in this passage. But what we see here, what we don't see in 1 Peter, is that the context of us being a blessing to others, the context of us being humble and being of the same mind, is primarily to those that are our enemies. It's primarily to those people that we don't get along with, those people that do harm us, those people that do persecute us, those people that don't like us. And we all have them. Whether they're out in the workforce, whether they're out in our world at work, and how we have to deal with them. Maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a secretary, maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's at your school, maybe it's a bully at school, maybe it's somebody that's pushing you around, somebody that's hard on you, somebody that won't leave you alone, maybe it's somebody that's trying to get into your head and cause you pain because of all those things. Maybe it's somebody at church. You know, we've talked about before how much a blessing it is to come to the house of the Lord when everybody's dwelling in unity, how David says. And that's what we feel like, because we want to be happy when we're here together. We want to be worshiping together. We want to be unified, but we know that we're people and we're imperfect people. We have sin. And because of that sin, there are things that we say and that we do. Sometimes we mean, sometimes we don't mean, that causes strife and causes problems with each other that it's hard for us to handle and it's hard for us to get along with. And if we're going to grow this loving church, if we're going to grow this loving body of believers right here, we have to learn how to handle ourselves against our enemies. And not just those here, but we have some abroad, across the pond, as they say. Those across, the ocean, and those who don't like us as, not just as Americans, but as Christians. Because of what we do. Because of the freedoms that we feel like we have, or that we are endowed from our Maker, because of the love that we have for one another. The next slide, Nikita Khrushchev. A lot of you remember him. He was the face of communism there for a while. But Nikita Khrushchev, when he came and visited the United States, he says he was struck by Christianity. He said this about Christianity. He said, the difference between Christianity and communism is great. When someone hits you, when he talks about a Christian, when someone hits a Christian, you turn the other cheek. But when somebody hits me, I will hit them back so hard, their head will fall off. That's the mindset, isn't it? That's the mindset of the world. That's the mindset that we want. You come after me, you mess with me, I'm coming after you, and I'm coming after your family. How dare you come after me? You hit me hard, I'm going to hit you harder. And that's the way we've developed that lifestyle. But God tells us through Paul here as he writes, we're called to be different. We're called to be unique. We're called to be unusual. And this is not the way we're to react to people. Because if we have enemies, if we react this way to our enemy, you know, parents, you know this, you teach this to your kids, this makes you no different than the enemy. If you do this, this makes you no different than the enemy. There's one thing to be said for standing up for ourselves, but there's something else to be said, as Christ says, to love those who persecute you. So for the next couple weeks, there's a lot of things. There is no way, I don't know a single person that can preach this text in one sermon because of the wealth of information here. So we're going to take a look for a few weeks at some of the things that we can do, we're encouraged to do. Some little rules, maybe some guidelines, maybe some advice that Paul's going to give us for having to deal with those problematic relationships, those relationships that aren't very friendly to us, those people that are trying to hurt us, people that don't like us. And in doing so, become more of a growing church. The first step, he says there in that first point, is that we need to speak kindness to those that hurt us. Speak kindness. Speak with kindness. And you look at chapter 12, verse 14 as we start. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and don't curse. The obedient Christian must not only overcome the hate and retaliation, like Khrushchev might say, I want to hurt you back. I have those feelings to hurt you back, and I want to come after you hard. Christian, we have to overcome that feeling. But not only do we have to overcome that feeling, now we have to speak well of that person. So let's play this out. Somebody comes up to me and hits me. I have a reaction. I'm going to react in one way, shape, or form. I can either hit them back. As Khrushchev said, that's what communism does. But Christianity is supposed to be different. That's what the world says for us to do. But Christianity says we're supposed to be different. That's what a lot of parents and a lot of people tell their families and friends to do, but we're called to be different. Somebody hits me, I can either hit them back, or I can say, wow, that is a nice left hook. You could do something with that. Have you ever thought about boxing professionally? You ever thought about professional wrestling? You could do that. Yeah. Or, I've had a toothache for weeks. I've been trying to get rid of that tooth. Thank you. You saved me money from going to you saved my copay. Not only do we have to overcome the feelings, we have to shower the love. We have to shower the love. And that's what Jimmy read to us just a few moments ago. Matthew 5:44 says, love your enemies, do good to those that persecute you. And Luke's account is the next verse here, if you'll throw up that Luke account there. But I say unto those who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. You can go on to that next slide there. Pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other one also. From the one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. And from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. As you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that of you? The sinners love those that love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even the sinners do the same. See, God says, if I want you to be different, I want you to be so different that if you love those who love you, that's great. Everybody can do that. A dog can do that. A dog does that. You show the love to the dog's going to show the love back. A sinner, an enemy, a worldly person, you show them love, they're going to show that back. But you show love to somebody that treats you awful. You show love to somebody that persecutes you. You show love to somebody that is harsh towards you. That's different. That is going to cause... You know how different that is? Number one, it's going to make them even mad at first. It's going to make them look strange in front of people if they say something to you and you come back with a compliment. You're going to feel a little awkward. They're going to feel really awkward because of what happened. But you know what others are going to say? Man, I wish I could control myself like that person did. Man, I wish I was able to handle my emotions like that. Did you see how they did that? Somebody hurt them and they turned around and blessed them because of it. You know, that would shock the world if we did that, wouldn't it? You know why I know it would? Because it did. It shocked the world. That's exactly what Jesus did. Father, forgive them. I'm blessing them. They've hurt me. They've hurt me bad. My back hurts. My hands hurt. My head hurts. I'm tasting blood and sweat as it pours down. I can feel the sweat dripping into all those wounds and it burns. My feet hurt from the nails that are in there. My muscles are sore from carrying this cross. I even got rope burns from my hands where they bound me when they first arrested me. But God, you know what? Father, just wipe their slate clean. They had no real idea what they were doing. Father, forgive them. They didn't know what they were doing. You notice what happens with the soldier in the story? The centurion that's there? You notice what he says? When the darkness comes and the earthquake and Jesus gives up the ghost. You remember what he says? Based on what he witnessed from Jesus and his reaction, not only to the two thieves beside, but to Mary and John and to the soldiers as they did that to them, and how he remained at peace with it. Father, forgive. You know what they said? Truly, this man was the Son of God. Now you flip that around to us, and if we react in the same way, will it be harder? Yes. Will it be difficult? Yes. But if we react the same way, do you know what people will say of this? They'll say of us, truly, in a world full of people where Christians are full, where the churches are full of hypocrites, in a world where people are saying one thing and doing another, that person right there, truly that person is a true Christian. Now, wouldn't that be awesome? You see how that works? God says, I want you to be different. I want you to be so different that when your enemy persecutes you, I not only want you to suppress the pain and the hatred that you might have for them, I want you to compliment them. To give them, and the word bless is a little different than what we've looked at before. When we were looking at the word bless, we were looking at it in one way. But here we get the word eulogy from this word bless here in the Greek. What do you do at a eulogy? Have you ever been to a funeral when somebody stands up at a eulogy and just talks awful about the person, about how horrible they were? Well, maybe you have, but I bet it's been rare. For the most part, the person doing the funeral does the best job they can of singing the praises of the person that has passed. No matter how bad a life they might have lived. They try to find the good in everything that they did. In every little thing. They look for the good and bring it out to light. That's what we try to do. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do that. Look at 1 Peter, the next verse. 1 Peter 2, 21 through 23. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revel in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but he continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. Jesus, I'm just asking you. Paul says, I just want you to do just what he did for us. And you see, Stephen did this too. Remember when Stephen was stoned? You know, after they gnashed their teeth at him and made those comments and throw the stones at Stephen, and he's about to die, and he looks up and he sees Christ standing at the right hand of God. You remember what Stephen said there? Lord, do not hold this sin against them. See that? Speak kindly to those, even when they don't to us. As Christians, we can act pretty well, but it's how we react in a given situation that shows just how Christian we are. You know, there's a saying that is true to some extent. You fight fire with fire. There's something to be said about that with firefighters. There's something that you have to do. Sometimes you can fight fire with fire. But from my experience, if I'm burning a brush pile or something in the kitchen is on fire, I never think, what's the best way to put this out? I think I'll start another fire. Well, you know, this brush pile, this trash is burning, and I believe it may, if I don't do something, it might start and drift over here to all these leaves and catch all the woods behind my house on fire. What am I going to do? I think I'll go light another brush pile. It never enters my mind. Because we know truly the best way to put out a fire is with water. Is you put it out. Sometimes when we fight fire with fire, all we do is make more fire. One more verse on this point, then we'll move on to the next. 1 Corinthians 4, 11 through 13. To the present hour we hunger and thirst. We are poorly dressed and buffeted and homeless. And we labor, working with our own hands. When reviled, we bless. When persecuted, we endure. When slandered, we entreat. We have become and are still like the scum of the world, the refuse of all things. That's how Paul says. That's how we are. But you know what? As we mentioned, that first verse we looked at in 1 Peter, as Peter talked about, we're looking for an inheritance. We're looking for something that's greater. And even if we have to deal with a little pain, and even if we have to deal with a little suffering, and even if we have to deal with little things that are uncomfortable here, if we know that's coming, isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth it? Second aspect he tells us to do. And this will be the last one we get to do this morning, I think. The second aspect, he says, to empathize with the emotions of others. Back in Romans 12. Verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Now when Peter talks about it, he says to be sympathetic. But this is not sympathy that Jesus or Paul is asking for here us to do. He's not asking us to be he's not asking us to express sympathy. Sympathy is to feel sorry for someone. If I see you and I see you in a condition where you're at loss or you're hurting and I express sympathy, I feel sorry for you. To empathize with you is I'm going to take that on with you. I'm going to get down with you. And it's one of the best ways, there's two ways I want us to look at this, two examples that I want us to look at that help us understand this. And the first one, I'm going to do the earthly one, then I'm going to do the godly one. The earthly one is Job and his three friends. You can look in Job and in chapter 2. When Job's three friends come to Job after he's in dire need of some support. I mean, he's lost everything. Job is he has lost his health. He has lost his family. He's lost all of his wealth. And Job is in a situation, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We know that his patience is there, but we also know that there's some frustration on Job's part because Job wants to know why this is happening to him. And his three friends are going to come in, and Job's going to later say, you guys are miserable comforters because you're opening your mouth and you're telling me I did all this wrong, and you're telling me that God is punishing me, and I didn't do anything. Now they're going to come in, and when they open their mouth, that's when they do it. But before they open their mouth, this is what happens. When those three men, Bildad, Eliphaz, and Zophar, when they come in, they see Job from a distance. And as they get closer to him, they don't even recognize who he is. They can't even see. They look at him, and as they're walking, I wonder if Bildad looks and says, Zophar, that? Surely not. Is that Job? Is that good? Man, he looks awful. I mean, he looks rough. So they didn't even recognize him. He looks so different. He looks so bad. And as they get up to him, you know what the Scripture says they do? They tear their clothes. They set in the dust and ashes. You know why they did that? Because that's where Job was. That's empathy. That's empathizing. He says, I'm not going to stand up here. I'm not going to come to you while you're hurting and pat you on the back and just say, yes, it'll be all right. I feel sorry for you. Things are going to be so much better on you later on. I'm going to comfort you. Can I get you anything? Can I go get you some Chick-fil-A? Can I wash your car? Can I get you something? Can I get you a cup of coffee? Is there anything I can do for you? No. When we're talking about as Christians, we're to be different. We're just not supposed to feel sorry for everybody. We're supposed to feel sorry with them. You weep with those that weep. You rejoice with those that rejoice. I remember an image that I had in my mind. I don't want to upset her. I know it will, but when your sister-in-law, Christy's sister-in-law, passed away, when Ron's sister passed away with cancer, she was young, all young. And it's been several years ago now. She was in the hospital bed. And as she was at the hospital, one of the images that I have come to mind is as I'm in there and we're getting ready to pray, Christy climbs into the bed with her and lays in the bed with her. That's empathizing. That's going where they are. That's what we're called to do. To meet them where they are. And I tell you what this really is. That's the Job example. That's the human example. We're going to elaborate this a little more. But next slide. This is what is called incarnational ministry. We have this in youth ministry. You know, I teach youth ministry in Heritage. And this is incarnational ministry. This is how youth ministry can be effective in the lives of people. And you know what this is? You know what incarnation means? It means to become flesh. Or to become one with. That's what it means. So if we look at it in the line of what Eddie's doing, for him to be successful, he's got to become one with the kids. He's got to get down into their life and feel the same thing that they feel. Because you know what? I bet Eddie gets a whole lot of conversations about, my girlfriend broke up with me. Or so-and-so dumped me. You know, what he wants to say is, I'm sure, and I don't want to mess anything up, but he wants to say is, man, you have no idea what you got in store for your life. There's tons of fish in the sea. That's the tagline, right? You are going to marry that person. You're 12 years old. I mean, you got a long time before you meet the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. You got all kinds of time. But you know what you can't say to that 12-year-old? That right there. Because the 12-year-old right there, that's their world. You got to get there with them. You got to become one with them. That's what Jesus did. You see, for him to come like us, for him to understand, and we know that he understood, he made us. So I think he did it for us so that we might be able to see what it meant for him to give up what he did to come to be like us. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Verse 14 there, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We are able to see how God can understand us. We are able to know that God can love me and know how I feel because he became like me. He took on flesh, became like me. He empathized with me. Look at these next two verses real quick in Hebrews that give us this idea. Therefore, he had been made like his brothers in every respect. That he should be capitalized, but I copied and pasted. In every respect, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God to propitiation for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Because he was tempted, because he suffered, now he can help us. Go to the next one. In Hebrews, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Otherwise, if he had come down, we could go to the throne room of God and be judged. And we would more have a right to say, you don't know how I feel, God. You never were flesh and blood. You don't know how bad it hurt. You don't know how people react and humans react in those situations if Christ had never came to this earth. God says, I'm going to show you, I do know what it's like. I'm going to show you, I do know how you feel. I'm going to send my son to be one of you. That is what he's asking us to do. See, in all of these things, he's not asking us to do something that he himself has not already done. Bless those who treat you rough. Now, you weep with those that weep. You rejoice with those that rejoice. You get down with them and you feel it. I read this quote about this week. The incarnation was the ultimate act of communication. It testifies to the extent of God's love as he reached out to his creation. He not only knew his audience, he became one with them. That's what he's asking us to do. And here's the thing. Well, I also read this week, during the days, Jesus' day during the temple, there was a custom during the days of entering the temple. Usually everybody would go in, when they would go into worship, they would all go in the same way into the temple. They would all leave the same way. So if you're going into worship, into the temple, you would all go in together and then you would all come out together. And we have examples in the scriptures of those people that would lay at the gates of the temple, at the door of the temple, and they would beg for alms. We have those examples. But if you had a tragedy that happened with your family, I read this week, if you had a tragedy that happened with your family, you didn't go in like everybody else went in, and you didn't go out like everybody else went out. You know what you did? You went against the crowd. You started at the front of the steps, and when everybody was going into the temple, you walked to the back before you went into the temple. You know why they did that? So every person could see the face of the person that was hurting. They wanted them to feel the pain that they had. They left. They would go to the back and they would wait. As everybody would come against the grain, they would be there and everybody would see the pain on their face so that they could see the suffering. That's the empathizing. That's the empathizing there that we're called to be. One verse in Psalm 56. I got to hurry. One verse in Psalm 56. You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? I had not ever noticed this verse before. This is really neat. You think of all the years you've cried for yourself, for somebody. David says, God, you've kept count of my tossings. Tossings at night, maybe not being able to sleep. You know my sleepless nights. And you've put my tears in a bottle. Like God's taken all our tears and He's put them in a bottle for us. And He's got them stored in our book, the book of law. See, God knows when we hurt. He knows when we feel pain. He wants us to share that with others. He wants us to feel that. Now but there again, we know that, but the context of what we're talking about here is people who do us wrong. See, it's easy for me to you. It's easy for me if you've lost someone and we're friends and we're family and we're close. It's easy for me to come and get into bed with you or to talk to you or to wrap my arms around you and hug you or to get down on the ground with you. It's easy for me to do that for you. But this is the context of those who treat us awful. And it's easy for me to celebrate if you've got good news, if we're close, if we love each other, if we're happy. It's easy for me to celebrate with you. But if you're my enemy, it's very easy for me to not like it when you're happy, right? You got a big promotion. You deserve it. I did. Good things happen. Shouldn't happen to them. Could have happened to me. Bad things happen to the enemy. Had it coming. They deserve that. Should have happened a long time ago. And that's our mindset. A couple verses in Proverbs before we close out. Look at the proverb here. That first one on the screen, and then we're going to turn to one and read. Proverbs 24, 17 and 18. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls. Do not let your heart be glad when it stumbles, lest the Lord see it. All right, I know I'm not the easy person to listen to. I know so many things to keep yourself occupied with, but if to me, you need to pause this morning and you need to make sure you read this verse. Listen to what this verse says. Do rejoice when your enemy falls. Do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. Why, Solomon? Lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away His anger from him. Don't let the Lord see it and be displeased. One more. Proverbs 17. Read this and then we'll close out the lesson this morning. Proverbs 17:5. Whoever mocks the poor insults his maker. He who is glad at calamity means if you're glad at the fortune of others, whoever is glad at calamity will not go unpunished. See, we're called to be different, church. We're called to be different. Fellowship is more than coffee and casseroles. Fellowship is getting along. Fellowship is dealing with each other. Fellowship is about speaking kind words to people even when they don't speak kind words to you. Fellowship is being nice to those that aren't nice to you. It's about when others hurt, you hurt with them even if you don't like them. And if somebody celebrates, even if they're awful to you, you celebrate with them. One commentator said, to refuse to rejoice with another reveals envy in your own heart. To refuse to weep with another reveals the lack of compassion in your heart. Either way, you have a serious problem. Is there anyone that you can rejoice with? Or anyone that you can cry with? Look at your life this morning as we deal with these problematic relationships. Romans 12, Jesus gave us an example of how to live. He taught us by what He did of how we should live. Let's pattern our lives with that. Let's do that. Let's speak kind words. Let's speak kind words. And let's make sure we rejoice and we weep with those when they're hurting and feeling it. This morning, Jesus is here, and He's gave us the example of these things. But the ultimate thing that He's here for is He's here for any of us to show His love if we want it. If we haven't been buried with Him in baptism, or if we've led a life astray, if we need to come home, He offers that to us this morning. So you look at your life and see what you need. And if there's something you need to fix, allow Him to take care of it as we stand and sing the invitation song.
Shine, Jesus, shine.